Hi, my name is Pooja. I'm the senior open source developer at OpenCraft.
And I'm Mike. I'm the Director of Program Experience Solutions at Western Governors University. And today we'll be presenting on model-agnostic AI-enhanced learning components.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to our session. I know this is the last session of the day for most people, and we appreciate you choosing ours. So my name is Pooja. I'm one of the senior developers at OpenCraft. And joining me today is Mike Hassett from Western Governors University. And our talk today is about a couple of AI-enhanced learning components. So in our session today, we'll mostly be discussing two XBlocks, which has AI evaluation capability to evaluate student responses. And one of that is a short answer type XBlock, and the other is a coding type XBlock. We'll take a little look into the technical implementation behind these XBlocks. We'll talk about some of the use cases that were experimented with for these XBlocks. And we'll talk a little bit about the prompt design, some model guardrails, and instructor control. And finally, we'll open it up for any enhancements and contributions from the community and questions. So I think we're all witnessing how valuable AI-driven feedback is in education. We've had plenty of talks over the conference, I'm sure, which will put that across more elegantly than I can, especially because it's able to provide personalized feedback per user at a very large scale. And I think it was one of the talks yesterday who kind of talked about how specific AI models have their own advantages. So there are some models which are better suited for certain tasks, while there are others better suited for other tasks. So it's important to kind of have that flexibility to choose which model you can use for which task that you want to perform. And so that was the reason behind we made sure that the XBlocks are not tied to a specific model. And we made sure that it's generic enough so you can use whichever preferred AI model that the instructor would like to use to perform the evaluation. At the time of developing the XBlock, the 5 models listed here were the most popular ones. So that's what we went with. But I'll talk a little more in the technical implementation, and you'll see that extending it beyond these models is relatively straightforward. So it's not like tied to just these models here. And for those of you who are interested, the XBlocks are available at the GitHub link mentioned here. Both of these are XBlocks, and then a couple more additions that we made since are available here. So I can pause for like a second if anybody wants to access that. Okay. So I'll start with the short answer type XBlock. And as the name suggests, it's used for evaluating short text response of a student using AI. And both of these XBlock depend upon instructor-defined system prompts. This is what kind of makes or breaks your XBlock. It's like the most important knob that the instructor can control for the evaluation that you want from your XBlock. And I don't know if you can see the screenshot. This is like the student view of the short answer type XBlock. You can see like the question will show up on the top, and a student can just type in their response and click submit. and the AI evaluation will show up in the dark blue like that. This is a very basic example. So the better your prompts are, the better evaluation you get. So just wanted to give you a sense of like what this would appear like. And on the studio for instructors, you can control, once you add the XBlock and you edit it, you can control all the things that I was talking about through Studio. So you get a drop down to select the AI models of your choice. And you would require an API key. So whatever your LLM providers are, you can use that API keys to provide it here. And if you are using Llama models, where most of the times you're hosting your own Llama models, you would require the API URL as well. So this field will only be like processed if you have a Llama model, like if you've chosen the Llama model in the dropdown. Otherwise, we'll ignore it. But since this screenshot was taken, we also added the ability to add in your API key and API URL through the site config so that you can add that in through like an instance level rather than per XBlock level. So that is available already. I just didn't update the screenshot. So, and yeah, this is where you enter your question here, which as I showed in the previous slide, will show up for the student to answer. And this is the most important part, which is the evaluation prompt. So we try to keep it simple and just give it like the large text box, so you can add in as much or as little as you choose. And we'll talk more about the importance of the prompt and what's the right way of setting this in a little bit. But yeah, this is where you would set your evaluation prompt. So the idea is that the XBlock will take. So I'm sure most of us have used AI models, or has anybody used the API stuff? Remember when ChatGPT came up with API stuff and you had to set like system prompts and then you have your questions and answers. So that's basically it. So this would be your system prompt. We would combine this with the question and the student response to build the context for the AI and send that whole to your model, to your provider, and you get back the evaluation. So that's how it works. So moving on to the coding XBlock. Now this one will allow the students to submit and execute the code. So you can actually see the code being run while when the student submits it, you can actually see that being executed and you can see the output of your code. And that entire thing is sent to the AI for evaluation. So we use Judge0. If anyone's heard of Judge0, it's like an online code execution platform, which is very popular. It's open source. So you have the option of either running your own Judge0 instance and then have that, use that, or they do also provide a subscription model. So you can just buy your subscription and use that. You will need a Judge0 API key when you're using the coding XBlock. So it uses that. And Monaco editor is to just kind of give you a syntax highlighting. Monaco editor is the editor of choice for VS Code. So most of us are pretty familiar with it. And it supports a lot of programming languages. We decided to just stick to the programming languages that I've listed here, just because that was what was most suitable for our use case. But if you want to extend it beyond this, if you want to add new programming languages, as long as it's supported by Judge0 and Monaco editor, it should be relatively straightforward to just extend that. So yeah, so that is the coding XBlock. I'll show you a screenshot of what that looks like for a student. This is the student view. As I mentioned, it will show up the question that we've set up, and it will show you the programming language of choice, and the student can write in their program and hit submit code. When they hit submit code, it will actually execute the code And it will show you the output in the output tab here. And if you click on the AI feedback tab, it will show you the entire feedback. So I have a screenshot of that as well. So yeah, this is what the AI feedback would look like. So the studio side is pretty much same as the short answer type. It's just that there's one additional field for your Jet0 API key. Everything else is pretty much the same as the other one. So this one is coding XBlocks. Now to take a little look into the technical implementation, as I said, the heart of it depends on LiteLLM library. So both these XBlock and whatever XBlock that we're trying to build on top of this on the GitHub is depending on LiteLLM. LiteLLM, if you guys see, it's open source and it has a very well-defined API for interacting with different AI models. So if, as I mentioned before, if you want to extend your XBlocks to support more models than what was listed there, as long as that's supported by LiteLLM, you can just add that into the XBlock and it will work right out of the box. Just to refresh, we use Jet0, so it is secure and sandbox. It uses like a hosted instance and to execute your code, so you don't have to worry about that part. And again, the importance of instructor-defined prompts. So that's the main thing that you control. And to talk a little more about the prompts, I'll hand it over to Mike.
Yeah, and again, thank you all for being here this evening, sharing this time with us. So, as Pooja noted, when we set out to build these, we wanted to make these as extensible as possible to allow everybody to use them if they could. So, OpenCraft went to great lengths to try to make it really configurable and easy to use. One of the things that we discovered as we've been testing them is that what we started out to build turns out to have a lot more capability than we imagined. We actually have explored 4 use cases for what started out as our.
Can you hold the mic?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. What started out as a short writing exercise with feedback. We've actually found 4 use cases for it already that we've tested extensively. A couple of weeks ago, one of the members of my team set out to explore additional use cases. She's identified 17 more that we're in the process of testing. And as Pooja has said, it's all about the prompts, right? The prompts control everything about the experience that the students are going to have. So one, the writing evaluation works great. Here you can see we give them a prompt. The student enters a very short, maybe 200-word kind of response to it. It reviews them from, it can, depending on what you put into the prompt for the rubric, I was going to say hubris, that you put into the prompt, which is probably accurate as well. You can have it evaluate the logic. You can have it evaluate the grammar, the syntax, the organization, anything you want, depending on what you tell it to do in the prompt. You can have it grade the writing, a letter grade, a numeric score based on your rubric, or you can just have it give some general feedback and let the student then retry and see if they can do better the next time around. A second use case, role plays. We started out by testing a project management role play and went, wow, this works pretty well for kind of a soft skills thing. The LLM is given the instructions to be the part of the customer. The student plays the project manager and they interview the customer to find out, about the project that they're going to be managing for them. We then decided to try it with more technical skills. So we created a nursing scenario with an entire set of symptoms. And as you'll see, a wide range of guardrails. We've learned the importance of guardrails as you build out these prompts to make sure that things don't go awry. And in this case, you can see that the LLM is actually providing stage directions essentially about the patient to help the nurse diagnose what's going on. You can control all of that as well in the prompt. So you can tell it, how you want those to display. You can tell it what to do If the nurse tries an intervention, I'm going to take your blood pressure. Okay, go ahead. You can program it to do all of that, and you can give it a list of vital signs, ranges of vital signs that it will return when the nurse gives those interventions. And you can set it to randomize those. You can set it to only return a certain one, all depending on what you're trying to accomplish in the scenario. A third is an in-course tutor with the directed outcome. So in the prompt, we told it, we want you to coach the student to an answer like this. And so as the student puts in their input, the LLM comes back, and we told it at the end of its feedback, it always has to ask a follow-up question. So every time it gives another question to prompt the student to go a little bit farther until the student achieves an answer kind of like what we're aiming for. So a really nice thing for getting people, if you're trying to get them to a sort of fact-based answer, to help guide them there. And then of course, the opposite, the open-ended outcome. You can actually give the student, in this case, we asked what questions you have about using modules in Python. The student actually says, I don't really understand the value of modules. And the LLM comes back with, well, what specific aspect is unclear? And the student then goes from there. And again, we can tell it to provide sample code, don't provide sample code. You can tell it how detailed you want the answers to be. We limited it in the amount of detail it would give to try not to overload the student too much right away. All of those things controllable in the prompt. I don't think I have a slide for it, but the same kind of thing is true of the programming, the coding exercise, XBlock. You can control how much response it gives. So if you don't want it to provide sample code, it won't. If you want it to provide sample code, it will. The first time we loaded it in and we posted the code, it came back with, no, basically you're an idiot. Here's what the code should look like, exactly like this. Do it this way. But that might be what you want the first time around. I mean, we tell it not to be insulting, but the nice thing is by controlling the prompts and the responses, you can scaffold using the same XBlock as you go through the course, giving less and less feedback as they go through these exercises, until at the end you might be saying, no, that code's not right. Try it again. And they have to try it again. And no, still not there. And they try it again. Now, obviously, they're opening up another browser and putting it into Claude and saying, what the hell should I be typing here, right? And then, oh, yeah, that's right. Hey, you got it finally. So the prompts. We discovered that prompts can be pretty easy. This is the one that was used for the short answer, for one of the short answer questions. All right, and you can see it's basically just setting up the context, telling the LLM what role they're going to play, and then telling it don't do grades, don't make specific suggestions, and then of course the most important guardrail, if the student tries to get you to do something inappropriate or if the student does something inappropriate, tell it to stop, right? And then also be positive. Yeah, usually what we're finding is it's good to tell it to address the student in the first person, because otherwise it kind of can go off and refer to them in weird ways. Prompts can also be really difficult. This is, I don't expect you to read any of this, but this is 3 of the 6 pages for the nursing scenario prompt. It's got randomized variables in it. You can tell it to pick a gender for the patient. You can tell it to pick a name for the patient that's consistent with the gender. You can tell it, ranges of symptoms, ranges of diagnostic results, those kinds of things. And it can pick and choose. So you can set parameters. This person has COPD. That means that they're only going to have, blood pressure within this range. Or you might have to tell, if they're male, it might be within this range. If you chose a female character, it's going to be within this range. All of that controlled by the prompt, somewhere in those 6 pages. You start to see over here the kind of guardrails. So symptom consistency, you want to make sure that all of the symptoms are consistent so that you don't drive the poor nurse crazy, right? You want to start to have knowledge limitations, things like if they ask you something that's not in this list of diagnostics, tell them you don't know, right? And you control all of that. What you start to get into, I don't want to go so far as to say it's like the context prompt that we heard about in the keynote this morning, but you're starting to get there. You're starting to put in things about the social relationship, the kind of interaction, the instructional relationship, the knowledge that the LLM is going to bring to bear. All of those kinds of things you can start to shape in these prompts. So we found, some guardrails are kind of always necessary. Knowledge rails, scenario rails. One thing I think that's important about these is that to some extent, the LLM is always a character in a role play, right? You've got to tell it what you want it to be. Do you want it to be a peer, an instructor, a coach, a nurse, whatever, a patient? And you've got to put guardrails around that. How much do you want to tell them about how to be that person or that character? Professional rails, keeping everything within a professional context, making sure that you're controlling the outputs that the LLM is giving so it doesn't start doing things that we wouldn't want it to do. One thing about that, Pooja's team is also building us a script that will pull on a scheduled basis every input and output done through these XBlocks so that we can review on a daily basis. We can review what it's doing. And if we start to see it, going off the rails, we can figure out how to stop that. Interaction rails, what kind of interactions you want them to have for the instructional purposes. And then for certain kinds of experiences, your prompts might need other rails. As I mentioned, symptom guardrails, if you're doing that kind of nursing scenario. Or in the project management, the first time we built that, the LLM responded when the project manager said, well, can you tell me about your customers? It went on for about a page and a half of customer description, which basically answered all the questions right there. And I thought, wow, when I was a project manager, that was a customer I wanted. But for the purposes of the exercise, that was too much. So we actually tell it, don't give it all away. And in fact, the project manager scenario, the guardrail we put in was, you don't want to make it easy on the student. And so it didn't. It came back with, I don't really know. And so they had to ask another question, ask the question a different way until finally it gave up the answer. It's amazing what one sentence will do to these interactions. So that's the importance of the prompt. As far as, I know Pooja is going to talk about next steps for the XBlocks themselves, but I will tell you that from our perspective, we are working on templatizing these prompts so that all of our instructional designers will know how to build these, what these guardrails represent, and how to make sure they get these guardrails in. So that's the big project that my team's working on is templatizing that stuff. And then I'll let Pooja talk about the technical next steps.
So yeah, while as Mike mentioned, you can add your prompt
Can you
to.
check the mic quickly? Yeah, it's fine. You
I just have to keep it close. Okay.
I think it's running low on battery.
All right, sure. So yeah, while you can add in the prompt to grade the response, we don't have a gradebook integration, so you can't just get the grade showing up onto your gradebooks just yet. That's something we're hoping to kind of add or have somebody contribute onto the GitHub. And as I mentioned, if anybody wants any model extensions or any other support that doesn't exist yet, that's another thing that we see. Most likely people are going to want, why doesn't it support our DeepSeek model? Why not? So as I mentioned, it's pretty straightforward, but it still needs to be added into the code. So if that's something that people would like to do, that's also a welcome contribution.
I would say that the way Pooja said it earlier today, which is is we're not asking for feedback. If you think there's a better way to do it, then send your engineers into the GitHub and have them fix it.
I said it's open source. I mean, yeah, we could use all the contributions that you guys can think of. So, yeah. So that was pretty much what we had. We can open for questions.
Let's use this one. Look at, I think Brian's a bit weak, so if you can share that one, we can listen. Please use the mic so it also has
Okay, I have questions. This is awesome. Super excited. Yes, we want grading support. We'll have to see what we can do to make that happen because you got us a lot of the way to something we needed. So thank you for that. Two questions I have. Is there a word or character count on that short answer response on what you can put in?
Yeah, we've stuck to like, I think it's like 200 characters or so right now. Is that better?
Oh, way better.
Okay. Well, for now we've gone with the 200 character limit. But again, it's the XBlock thing that we can just extend if that's what we want. But generally, we go with 200 character limit for like a short response answer. That could be another enhancement if you want like a long text response that needs to be evaluated. That's another thing we can add into it.
And then my second question is, can you currently choose a custom GPT as the GPT used, like where I've trained it already on a whole set of knowledge I want it to know?
You can if it's a llama based model. So if you've got it's not GPT-4, then it's llama based. And if you're hosting your own, typically people prefer llama, so we kind of supported that one. So I can go back to. Sorry. Yeah, so you see the API URL there, you can provide that, and either here or site config, you can actually add in your API, the custom API.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, we did also add in like a maximum number of response that the students can add. And that is configurable through the settings and in Studio. So if you want to limit your students to like maximum of 3 responses, you can set that as well. We have that. Thank you.
Clear? My next. Is this in production now? And
I will not bore you with the long story that Pooja has heard too much of. Our AI ML team at WGU required that we reconfigure the back end to go through a kind of a middleware we've created for LLMs that provides some training and some guardrails already built in. So it took a while for them to be ready for that. So Pooja's team just, I think this week, gave us what we expect to be the production version of that, and it's being tested by our AI ML group. When I was invited to present with Pooja, it was with the understanding that I would be providing you actual results of what students had experienced. I have failed, so just to note.
Yeah, that was another feature where, to your question, it was their own service, like LLM service that we wanted. So we do have that option where you can use your own LLM service if you serve that. But it's not this straightforward. You have to go through like the configuration. So it's hidden behind a flag. So it's not by default, but if you want, yeah, you could do that.
so my real question was about cost, but I guess it's too early to do that.
Yeah, our ML team was really happy when they saw the limitation. But I will tell you, as we started building out these more robust experiences, we realized, I think the default was like 9 I've told them that we need at least 30. And they have told me, well, we're allowing 30 per student per day. So we're having some negotiations about that right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Quick question about auditability. What have you thought about it? What kind of things are you storing in like the learner's response to the exercise right now?
So we are storing the questions, we are storing the AI response, and we are storing the user submitted response as well. So all of this has been stored on the database. So as you mentioned, we are actually currently working on exporting that data so they can actually audit it however they want. That brings me to the next enhancement that we would like is probably have some sort of like event emission or something when you have the AI response. So you can have an audit trail onto our logs. That's another thing that we're looking to build.
Have you tested with different LLM models and to see if or how much the LLM performance affects the evaluation, or is there consistency or differences?
Well, I'm sure there are differences. I don't know if you guys have done any testing. I'm sure you might have done it, but there's definitely differences, and that's kind of the reason we try to give you the flexibility to choose which model you want to use. Because from my personal experience, I think when you're trying to code, Claude has a nicer thing. Don't kill me for that, but so it's up to you. So there's definitely like some models do better in others. So we tried to offload that responsibility to the instructor. So like. Yeah, it's like you choose whichever thing that you think is good for this question.
I will tell you, I do my testing exclusively in Claude. Another member of my team exclusively ChatGPT 4.0, I believe. Our service doesn't provide Claude. I think it's been great, but I'm not going to have it. And so we'll probably be using GPT 4.0 at our institution, at least for the time being, until we get enough repetitions in it that we can really evaluate. One of my concerns about testing stuff like this is, short of having 1,000 students go through it, it's going to be really difficult to say how good it's going to be. And so the nice thing is at WGU, I can put this in a course next week and 1,000 students will go through that course by the end of the month. And so we should get repetitions really quickly and we'll learn, a lot about it.
I was just going to comment. This is probably one of the hardest XBlocks for me to make this comment on, but I'll say it anyways, which is have been thinking a bunch about how to have a playbook for XBlocks to kind of go from we exist and we're being used in a site, in a location, and we're being experimented with, through to like we are now meeting the threshold to like be installed by default, even if it's advanced but off, to eventually being considered advanced but on, to and with the AI blocks, things are probably changing quick enough and the expectations are, the bar is pretty high. So this is probably a very difficult block to do that with. But just wanted to call out that it would be great. I don't know how many of these blocks exist that are similar-ish, but it would be helpful to have something that can get to being an advanced, at least advanced default off, if not advanced default on block. So anyway, that's the hope. But yeah, I imagine that takes a lot of coordination, but I just want to comment on that.
We would love to have that as a default. Yeah.
We'll be proposing it. So one thing I will tell you is having started showing this last December to people at WGU, I get messages every day asking me when this is going to become available. Having a tool like this in the flow of a course is so important. But I will tell you one thing that we've encountered. Our university is trying to develop a kind of, I'll call it a tutor chatbot, right? That is omnipresent for students. And they want it to run while they're in the course. one of the big things we've had to help everybody understand is this is not trying to be that. Even when we put in the tutor, kind of use case, it's still not trying to be the tutor, right? It's within the flow of the course, and that's a very different kind of experience. And helping people understand the difference. Everybody started calling this the chatbot. It's not a chatbot. It's a formative activity that is AI driven, and getting people to think about it that way has been really more difficult than I expected, but even more important than I expected. So if you all do start thinking about using this, you might consider how you have to educate people about, what it represents in your courses.
Ed wants to ask a question.
Ed wants to go find a place to eat.
We have a few more minutes, and also I want to congratulate you for making this so interactive, and I hope we can fill the remaining time with good questions, because it's a good opportunity. Maybe I'll ask one question. As someone who's pretty peripheral to the Open edX community, I went to the conversation about the AI extension earlier, because I think that's a really interesting topic, and how can we get more experimentation. Do you see that as a kind of a path towards maybe getting tools like this into the platform? Do you think this will be an alternative path? Do we need both? Kind of how are you thinking about this connected to those other things?
It's partly, I would say, it's partly fitting into the framework that was talked about. But I think the framework was far more extensive than what we were envisioning it. So if this can be extended into that and fit into that, that would be great. But it does kind of partly fit in at this moment, and this is what we had it in mind. So I don't know if that answers your question.
You mentioned earlier, like the idea of having some templates or things to help authors. I was curious whether you had explored kind of like either modes or things that would sort of move past that on the authoring side. So you could say like this XBlock is going to operate in one of these 5 modes or 17 modes or however many modes, right? And that might actually get you some of those template things dropped in advance, or like just how far the educator usability stuff, how far along that journey you think you are, or whether it's intentionally kept at a, the prompt is whatever you want. It's a one thing, and it could be as complicated or simple as you want. But I'm just curious, because I know you mentioned wanting to be very flexible, but yeah.
So our approach generally for designing any kind of custom work for Open edX or any of our other tools is basically we do it manually until we start to see patterns emerge, and then we decide whether templatizing that is worth it. So if we found that role modeling or role playing was, a big one, then we might get to one where, we create a role play specific one that's got a more form-based way of dealing with the prompt. I will tell you, one of the other XBlocks coming out of this one, and Artur is here, and he's been working on it as well. We have a multi-agent role play. So we did determine that, hey, it would be good if the LLM could play more than one role. One of the use cases for that is where the LLM is a coach and a participant in the role play. So that as the student is going through and they get a response from the character in the role play and they don't know what to do with it, they can turn to the coach and say, hey, what about this? Well, when we first started experimenting with that, we discovered that the LLM, depending on how the student interacted, sometimes lost its character. And so the coach would suddenly start replying as the character or vice versa. And so we actually had a purpose-built version of that created that actually has the coach on one side and the role play on the other. And you can program them a little bit separately that way. And the student responds to the coach over here, responds to the character over here. And that seems to help the LLM keep it straight. So that's an instance where we saw enough in the testing that we went, we got to do that. We're still trying to figure out how to solve that for the, we want to use the multi-agent role play for things like, I'm a teacher, I'm doing a parent teacher student conference. I've got the student and the parent in front of me. The parent says this, how do I respond? We don't want the child to be the one to respond, on behalf of the parent, for instance. So we're still trying to figure out how in the prompting we can keep that stuff straight. But that's an example of where we've purpose built a variation.
Okay, time for one more. Ed, I knew you wanted to ask one.
The look on his face says it's difficult.
Actually, a couple questions. One is specifically related to the prompts, which is if I were to add this XBlock to my course and store a prompt, would it get exported with the course currently?
That's a good question. It should work like any other XBlock. So if you export it, if the exports get exported, it works in the same way. So it should work in the same way.
Got it. I was curious, because you could implement a different way of storing the prompts. Maybe you wanted them reused across instances of the XBlock, for example.
That's a good use case. Maybe we should think about that.
I think export, having export work always, this should be like a base requirement, unless there's some really good reason that we can't make that work. And then related to something Mike had said earlier, back to the sticking on the prompts topic. I think it would be really powerful to have, maybe even in just the docs for this XBlock, or maybe someplace else, a library of prompts that people could contribute to and sort of learn from what you've learned.
Yeah, where would you suggest such a repository reside, Ed?
Well, yeah, it's probably GitHub would be a great place for it, and people could PR in prompts that they thought would be valuable to folks outside their organizations, something like that.
Okay, cool.
I think the point you made is really like the prompt is the thing. And if you haven't done any self-education on prompt engineering, Ethan Mollick's book, the talk earlier mentioned it, Co-Intelligence, is a very accessible, very easy way to learn how to do it right. And it does talk about, you have to tell AI who it is. So anyway, just had to put in that 2 cents.
And I will let you in on a secret, although apparently this will diminish your evaluation of me. Claude and I collaborated on our prompt templates. I mean, it's great to use Claude or any other ChatGPT or GPT as a collaborator that way. I was able to put in scenarios and say, okay, I want to do this. What would that prompt look like? And it would come back and I would say, well, what if I wanted to do this instead? And it would come back and I could start then identifying the patterns. And then I could say, okay, so take those patterns and create a template for me. And boom, there's a template. And then we could test it out and go, oh, wait. And I could go back to Claude and say, hey, that template had this problem. How could I correct that? And, it lets me iterate through those things really, really fast. And so if that diminishes my intelligence in your eyes, fine. But it was really helpful. So I recommend it highly.
This is a different kind of intelligence, Mike. Any final thoughts from you, or ways to stay in touch, or next steps that you want the group to know about?
Yeah, there are emails. Feel free, contact either of us. We love to talk about these things. And again, if there's something about it you don't like, go fix it. Please.
Well, thank you so much for a great talk.